The strict HOA neighborhood woke up like a perfectly rehearsed show every morning. Clean streets shined like glass, flowers stood tall as if someone had told them to behave, and neighbors waved with smiles that never touched their eyes. It was a trapped world, wrapped in expensive rules and polished voices. In this glittering cage lived people who judged others faster than they breathed. And somewhere at the very edge of this world, almost invisible to everyone, stood the small servant quarters where Maria and her daughter Ella lived. Maria was 34, tired in the bones but gentle in the heart. She worked for 3 different houses inside the HOA, cleaning floors so shiny she could see her own exhausted face in them. She never complained. She couldn't afford to. Her daughter Ella was all she had, her reason, her strength, her only light. Ella, at just 11, carried a smile so warm it felt like a small sun in a cold sky. She woke early every morning to walk with her mother to the HOA bus stop before going to school. The rich residents usually passed them like wind. Some looked through them as if Maria and her daughter were transparent. But Ella still smiled. She believed a smile was free, and sometimes, free things held the most value. That morning, something felt different. The fog gathered low, hugging the streets like a quiet secret. The big houses disappeared halfway behind the thick mist, looking like sleepy giants half hidden in dreams. The silence was unusual, heavy, waiting, listening. Maria held Ella's hand a little tighter, without knowing why. As they approached the bus stop, Ella noticed a shadow near the bench. Someone small, someone shaking, someone out of place in this rich, polished world. It was an old lady, thin, bent, wearing clothes that looked worn by time. Her hair was messy, her shoes scratched, and her eyes carried a sadness so deep it seemed carved into her soul. No one went near her. A man in a suit stepped around her like she was a stray leaf. A woman walking her dog pulled the leash closer, as if the old lady carried something dangerous. Even the dog looked confused at the sharp tug. Ella felt something twist inside her chest. She didn't understand why grown-ups became cold at the sight of someone who simply looked tired. Maria noticed the same scene but tried not to look too long. In HOA communities, being soft-hearted was risky. Even kindness had rules here. The old woman stepped forward when the bus arrived. She walked slowly, leaning on a shaking hand. When she reached the door, the bus driver didn't smile. He didn't even blink. He simply said, "Fare." The woman reached into her small cloth bag, her fingers trembling. She took out a few coins. I don't have enough," she whispered, her voice cracking like dry leaves. "Please, I need to go. It's important. I'm trying to go home." The driver didn't move. "No fare, no ride. Move aside." The old woman's shoulders dropped, and sadness washed over her face like a quiet wave. She wasn't just short a little money. She was short of the world's kindness. Then came the HOA security guard. Tall, broad, full of importance he hadn't earned. He pointed at her as if pointing at a criminal. This community doesn't allow outsiders wandering around. You need to leave immediately." The old lady opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Only fear. Only humiliation. Only years of being invisible. Ella felt that same twist in her heart again, but this time it hurt. She couldn't watch this. She couldn't stand and do nothing. Something inside her, something pure, brave, simple, took control. And before Maria could stop her, Ella stepped forward. Her small voice cut through the heavy silence like a soft but powerful beam of light. I have money," Ella said, pulling out the small amount her mother gave her for snacks. "She can use my fare." Time froze. The bus driver stared. The guard stared. Passengers stared. The rich neighbors stared from behind tinted car windows. No one had expected a maid's daughter to stand up like that. The old lady looked at Ella as if she was seeing a miracle, like someone had touched her heart after a very, very long time. "Child," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Ella just smiled nervously. "It's okay. You can go." The driver sighed but accepted the coins. The old woman walked toward the bus steps, but before she could enter, a new voice sliced through the air. sharp, cold, full of authority. Who allowed that woman inside our community? Ella froze. Everyone froze. Mrs. Edith Grant, the HOA president, stood a few feet away, dressed in her usual power-colored outfit, her face stiff like carved stone. She walked quickly toward the bus stop, her heels clicking like small hammers on marble. She wasn't just angry. She was furious. Her eyes fell on the old lady first, eyes filled with disgust, not concern. Then her gaze locked on Ella. Her voice thundered. "You! What do you think you're doing?" Maria rushed to her daughter, pulling her gently but firmly. "Beta, come back here. Please." But Mrs. Grant wasn't done. Her voice carried the weight of someone who believed she owned every inch of the neighborhood. "Why is a stranger, especially in that condition, inside this community?" she yelled. The old lady took a step back inside the bus, clearly uncomfortable. Her hands shook harder. She looked at Ella silently, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else. Something deeper, like recognition. Maria bowed her head and whispered to her daughter, "Ella, say sorry. Do not argue. Something is wrong. Very wrong." But Ella didn't understand why kindness was wrong. The old woman finally sat inside the bus. Her tired eyes softened as she watched Ella. She placed a trembling hand on the window glass, like she wanted to hold Ella's face but couldn't reach. Her lips moved in a whisper, so faint it was carried away by the fog. "After years, I finally found someone kind." Ella didn't hear it. Maria didn't hear it. Mrs. Grant didn't hear it. But the moment felt heavy, like those words filled the air with a secret bigger than the neighborhood itself. The bus door closed. The old woman kept staring at Ella, her eyes shining with meaning, with sorrow, with relief. The bus drove away slowly, disappearing into the fog. Ella watched it until it became nothing more than a dot in the mist. And somewhere deep inside her, she felt a strange feeling, warm and cold at the same time. Like she had touched a story she didn't understand yet. Maria held her hand tightly, whispering again, "Beta, don't get involved in things here. People in this neighborhood, they don't like others being human." Ella didn't speak. She just stared at the direction the bus went. She didn't know who that woman was. She didn't know what her story was. She didn't know why Mrs. Grant reacted with so much anger. But she knew one thing. That morning was the beginning of something. Something big. Something hidden. Something that would shake the perfect HOA world from inside. She didn't know it yet, but that old lady would return. And when she did, Ella's life, Maria's fate, and the entire HOA's truth would turn upside down. Because Ella didn't just help a stranger. She helped a woman who carried a past powerful enough to break the whole community in half. And the mystery had only taken its first breath. The news of that morning did not travel slowly. It spread through the HOA like fire touching dry grass. By afternoon, the rich neighbors who had pretended not to see the old lady were suddenly talking louder than they ever had. Their voices carried through gardens, across porches, and into living rooms where gossip grew like poisonous vines. They spoke with judgment, with fear, with that strange cruelty that grows inside people who think money protects them from humanity. "Did you see that outsider?" A woman in sunglasses whispered while watering her already perfect flowers. "She looked like trouble." Another resident added, "And that maid's daughter, how could she involve herself? What if the old woman was dangerous?" The word stung, floating through the air, landing on Maria's heart like tiny thorns she had no strength to remove. Maria returned home that evening with shoulders heavy from a long day of work and an even heavier cloud of worry. She tried to keep her fears away from Ella, but the tightness in her voice gave her away. She cooked quietly, swept quietly, moved quietly, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping beast. Ella watched her mother carefully. She wasn't used to seeing Maria this tense. "Mama, are you okay?" Ella asked softly, standing near her in the tiny kitchen. Maria forced a smile, one that tried to hide an ache she couldn't explain. "I'm fine, Beta. I'm fine," she whispered, even though she wasn't. Every word she heard from the neighbors replayed in her mind. Every warning she imagined from the HOA felt like a shadow following her. Later that evening, There was a knock on their door, sharp, loud, impatient. Maria's heart dropped. She opened the door and froze. 2 HOA security guards stood there stern and expressionless, carrying clipboards like weapons. "We need to talk," one of them said without greeting. Ella stood behind her mother, her small hand gripping Maria's dress tightly. The guard's eyes drifted down to the child before returning to Maria. "We have received multiple reports that a suspicious outsider was helped inside the community. We need details." Maria swallowed hard. I don't know her," she said. "She was just at the bus stop." The guard wrote something on the clipboard, shaking his head as if her words disappointed him. "Did you invite her inside? Did you speak to her before this morning?" "No," Maria replied quickly. "My daughter only helped her with bus fare. Nothing else." The second guard stepped slightly forward. "This community has rules, Maria. Very strict rules. Outsiders like that woman are not allowed. You should have stopped your daughter." The word stung, not because of the scolding, but because Maria feared something worse. She feared losing her home, her work, her stability, everything she built for Ella. Ella felt the tension growing and whispered, "Mama, I only wanted to help." The first guard raised his palm. "We are issuing a warning notice. Next time, there will be penalties." He placed a folded paper in Maria's hands and turned away without waiting for a response. The door closed. The silence left behind felt like something heavy had been placed inside the small room. Maria unfolded the notice with shaky fingers. The bold red letters felt like fire. First warning, violation of HOA community guidelines, involvement with an unauthorized outsider. Ella watched her mother's eyes fill with tears. She tried to blink away. Maria didn't want her daughter to feel guilty, but the fear inside her wouldn't sit still. She sat down slowly, holding her head. "Mama, I didn't do anything wrong," Ella whispered, sitting beside her mother. "I know, Beta," Maria said, brushing Ella's cheek gently. "But people here, they don't see kindness the way you do." Ella looked toward the window, feeling a strange tightness in her chest. She remembered the old lady's eyes, soft, tired, full of something heavy. She remembered the way the woman whispered, the way she looked at Ella like she recognized her heart. And she couldn't understand why anyone would be upset about helping someone who was clearly struggling. "Mama, that old lady looked scared," Ella said softly. "Like she had no one." Maria sighed deeply. "Maybe. But this community is not our world, Ella. These people don't like when someone breaks their perfect picture." But Ella couldn't let go of the thought. Every moment from that morning replayed in her mind. The old lady's trembling hands. Her voice shaking like someone who had been silenced for years. The panic in her eyes when the guard touched her arm. The way her shoulders dropped with relief when Ella stepped forward. The way she whispered those soft words before the bus door shut. "Mema, do you think she went home safe?" Ella asked. Maria didn't know what to say. She wanted to reassure her daughter. She wanted to promise that everything was fine. But deep down, she sensed the morning was not the end. It was the beginning. Outside their window, HOA residents walked by, whispering in groups. One pointed toward the servant quarters. Another shook his head judgmentally. Their faces carried a mix of fear and superiority, as if Ella's small act of kindness had threatened their peace. A peace built on walls, rules, and silent cruelty. Maria closed the curtains, wanting to shield Ella from the world outside. But nothing could shield Maria from the dread that had settled inside her. She couldn't forget the way Mrs. Grant looked at Ella, like her daughter had broken an invisible law no one told them about. Later that night, when Ella fell asleep, Maria stood watching her. She brushed her daughter's hair gently and whispered to herself, "She has a good heart, too good for this place." Maria didn't know that the old lady's arrival would shake the entire HOA. She didn't know that the woman had returned for a reason. She didn't know that Ella's small act of kindness had opened a door to a story buried under years of secrets. But she felt it, like a tremor under her skin. Something was coming. Something she couldn't name. Something that scared her more than the warning notice. Ella, sleeping peacefully, held no idea that her life was about to change. She didn't know that her kindness had touched someone who had power, history, and a past that could tear the HOA's shiny surface apart. Because somewhere far away, inside the moving bus, the old lady sat quietly with Ella's small coin still in her hand. Her eyes were wet. Her heart trembled. And she whispered into the air, "After so many years, I saw hope in a child again." The night settled over the HOA community, but the storm had already begun. 2 days passed after Ella helped the old lady, but the memory refused to fade. The HOA neighborhood remained perfect on the outside, but something inside it felt different, like the air carried a quiet warning. The residents walked faster, spoke softer, and kept glancing toward the gates as if expecting something unwelcome to appear. Maria tried to pretend everything was normal, but every time she held the warning notice in her hand, her stomach tightened. She hid the paper in her drawer, hoping Ella wouldn't see it again. But hiding fear never made it disappear. It only pushed it deeper. On the third morning, Ella stood at the bus stop before school, clutching her backpack straps nervously. She kept looking around, as if expecting the old lady to appear from the fog again. The memory of the woman's trembling face wouldn't leave her. The way she had whispered something before the bus left. Ella couldn't forget it. Maria stood beside her, tired from worry, her eyes constantly watching the security guards patrolling like prison wardens. She kept her voice low and tense every time she spoke to Ella. "Beta, bus arti hai sida Charlie Jana. Kisi sebat mat kana," she whispered. Ella nodded, but her mind was somewhere far away, on an old woman with soft eyes and heavy silence. And then, like a shadow rising from nowhere, the old lady appeared. She stood just a few steps away from the bus stop, leaning on her cane, her frail body wrapped in the same worn shawl. She looked even weaker than before, as if the last 2 days had drained years from her. The morning sun made her silver hair glow faintly, but her face carried a strange mix of sadness and determination. It was clear she hadn't come by accident. The moment Ella saw her, her breath caught. She didn't understand why, but a warmth spread through her chest, like seeing someone you care about without realizing how much they mattered to you. "Mama, she's back," Ella whispered softly. Maria's face went pale instantly. Her heart dropped like a stone inside her chest. Before Maria could pull Ella away, security spotted the old woman. The first guard yelled, "Hey, you again? You cannot be inside this community." He marched toward her angrily. The old lady didn't move. She stood quietly, almost peacefully, her eyes fixed only on Ella. Not the guards. Not the residents. Not the expensive houses. Only the girl. Ella stepped forward without thinking, like her heart pulled her closer. "Auntie, why did you come back?" Ella asked softly. The old woman reached out with a trembling hand and placed it gently on Ella's cheek. Her touch was cold, but full of something that made Ella's eyes sting. A mixture of pain and warmth, like she had found something she had been searching for. "I came to thank you," the old lady whispered, her voice cracking. "You helped me, when no one else would." Ella bit her lip. "But, they will be angry," she whispered. The old woman gave a sad smile. "Let them be angry. A kind heart is worth more than their rules." The guards reached them fast. One grabbed the woman's arm sharply. You need to leave. Now." But the old lady didn't look at them. She kept her eyes on Ella, as if the girl's face was the only thing keeping her standing. Then a chilling voice sliced the air, sharp, cruel, familiar. "What is happening here?" Mrs. Grant was back. Her heels hit the ground like small explosions as she pushed through the crowd forming near the bus stop. Her face held the same fury that had filled it 2 days before, but today there was something else, fear. Real fear. Her eyes locked on the old woman, and something inside her froze. Her skin went pale. Her breath skipped. For the first time in a long time, the HOA president looked shaken. The old lady lifted her head slowly, meeting Mrs. Grant's eyes. And in that moment, the world around them went silent. The guard loosened his grip without realizing it. The residents who had gathered near their fences leaned forward. Even the dog walkers stopped mid-step. Something about the way the two women stared at each other felt heavy. Like there was a story between them no one knew, a story buried deep under the perfect neighborhood. Mrs. Grant took a small step back, almost stumbling. She caught herself quickly, trying to appear composed, but her voice betrayed her. You came back," she whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. The old lady didn't respond. She simply looked at Mrs. Grant with tired disappointment, like someone watching a loved one turn into a stranger. Maria noticed the tension and instinctively pulled Ella away, whispering fiercely, "Don't get involved. Please." But Ella couldn't move. Her heart demanded answers. Why was Mrs. Grant scared? Why did the old lady come back? Why did she only look at Ella, as if searching for something lost? The silence cracked when Mrs. Grant shouted again, regaining her harsh tone. "Security! Remove her immediately. She is not allowed here." Her voice shook slightly, but no one dared mention it. The old lady finally spoke, soft, but clear. "I came for the girl." Every neighbor, every guard, even Maria, turned their head sharply toward the old woman. Ella's eyes widened. "For me?" she whispered, barely understanding her own question. The old woman nodded slowly. "You remind me of someone I lost. Someone whose kindness built this place long before it turned cold." The guards hesitated, unsure of what to do. Mrs. Grant looked furious, but also unexpectedly worried, as if she knew exactly what the old lady meant and feared the truth spilling out. Maria stepped forward quickly, holding Ella protectively. "Please, we don't know anything. She is just a child." But the old woman shook her head. "Children see the truth adults forget." Ella felt her heart beating loud inside her ears. The old lady's eyes were soft but filled with secrets. Secrets she carried alone for years. Secrets connected to this community. Secrets connected to Ella. The bus honked in the background, but no one cared. Everyone was glued to the scene, watching something unfolding that didn't belong in their picture-perfect world. Security tried pulling the old woman away again. She didn't fight, but she didn't look away from Ella either. Her eyes carried a message, heavy, emotional, important. And for the first time, Ella felt afraid. Not of the old woman, not of the guards, but of the feeling that this woman knew something about her life, something Ella wasn't ready to understand yet. Mrs. Grant finally snapped and yelled, "Take her out. Now!" The guards pulled the old woman toward the gate. Her cane scraped the ground. Her shawl fluttered. Her eyes stayed on Ella until the very last second. And then she whispered something again. Words soft as a dying candle. "You deserve the truth, and I will give it to you." Ella's heart trembled. Maria's fear doubled. Mrs. Grant's face drained of color, and the old lady, once again, disappeared beyond the gate, but this time, she didn't leave in silence. She left behind a storm. A storm made for Ella. A storm that would uncover what the HOA worked so hard to bury. The days after the old woman's second appearance felt heavy, like the HOA neighborhood was holding its breath. Residents walked more carefully, talked more quietly, and kept watching the gates as if something, or someone, might walk in again. A strange tension spread across the community, pulling at everyone's nerves. For the first time in years, the perfect neighborhood felt imperfect, like a cracked mirror pretending nothing happened. Maria tried to keep Ella away from the gossip, away from the stares, away from the whispers floating through gardens and driveways. But whispers have a way of slipping through even the smallest spaces. Everywhere Maria went to work, she heard people murmuring about the old woman, that maid's daughter, and trouble. Some spoke with fear, others with anger, and a few with cruel amusement. But none spoke with kindness. Ella felt the shift too. When she walked with her mother, neighbors who once ignored them now stared openly. Security guards watched her longer than necessary. Even children from the HOA whispered behind her back at the bus stop. Ella didn't understand why helping someone innocent turned into something so big, so heavy, so wrong. It scared her in a way she couldn't explain. Like she had stepped into a story everyone else knew but no one wanted to tell. One evening, when Maria returned from work, her face carried a new level of stress. She didn't speak much at dinner. Her hands trembled slightly as she washed dishes. Ella sensed something was wrong. "Mama, what happened?" she asked softly. Maria didn't answer at first. She stood still for a long moment, her back turned, her breath uneven. Then she whispered, "People are saying strange things about that woman." Ella's heart skipped. "What kind of things?" Maria swallowed hard, then turned around slowly. "They said she used to live here. Many years ago." Ella's eyes widened. "She lived here? Inside the HOA?" Maria nodded weakly. "Yes. And not just lived. They say she owned something important." The words felt strange even leaving Maria's mouth. She didn't fully believe the rumors, but the fear they created was real. But no one tells the full story. They speak like they're hiding something. Ella leaned forward, whispering, "Mama, what was she to the HOA?" Before Maria could answer, a loud knock shook the door, sharp, loud, almost angry. Maria flinched. It was HOA security again. They entered without waiting, their boots tracking dust across the floor. One guard unfolded a paper while the other scanned the small room with judgmental eyes. "We need to ask more questions about the outsider," the taller guard announced. Maria stood straight, fighting her fear. "I already told you everything. She just thanked my daughter." The guard's tone hardened. "We have video footage of her walking around the entrance area. She spoke to your daughter more than once." He stepped closer, glare sharp. "Are you hiding something?" Maria shook her head quickly. "No, not at all." Ella stepped forward innocently. She didn't do anything wrong. The guard looked down at her, eyebrows narrowing. "Stay out of this, little girl." The harsh tone made Ella's chest tighten with fear. Maria quickly put an arm around her daughter. "Please, she's just a child." The second guard spoke now, voice low. "We want to know if the woman mentioned anything about the community. Did she talk about the past? About anyone important? About the old owners?" Maria blinked in shock. "Old owners? What do you mean?" The guard exchanged a quick glance with his partner. "Never mind. Just stay away from her." They left abruptly, leaving the house colder than before. Maria shut the door, locking it quickly. She leaned against it, closing her eyes, breathing hard. Ella held her mother's arm. "Mama, why do they care so much? Why are they scared of her?" Maria whispered, "Because she knows something, Ella. Something they don't want anyone to know." That night, Ella couldn't sleep. She sat by the small window, watching the quiet streets. The HOA streetlights burned like tired stars, and every house looked peaceful, too peaceful. But Ella felt something moving beneath that peace, like a secret buried under the ground, trying to break out. The next afternoon, when school ended, Ella walked toward the community gate slowly, expecting nothing, yet hoping for something. And then she saw her. The old lady was sitting on the stone bench near the guardhouse, fragile, tired, alone. But this time she wasn't just standing there by accident. She seemed to be waiting. Ella's heart leaped. She looked around quickly. No guards nearby. No residents watching. Just silence and a cold wind brushing the trees. Ella approached carefully. "Auntie, why did you come again?" The old woman lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were watery but warm. "I wanted to see you again," she whispered. "I needed to." Ella sat beside her. She felt a strange comfort sitting next to this woman. Like sitting next to a forgotten truth. "Are you okay?" Ella asked. The old woman smiled faintly. "Your kindness. It touched me. People here used to be kind once. Long ago." Ella tilted her head. "You know this place, don't you?" The old woman nodded. "More than anyone. I walked these streets before they were built. I planted some of the trees. I designed the homes. This place was once my dream." Ella's breath caught. She stared at the woman with wide, shocked eyes. "Your dream?" The old woman's voice became soft, hurt, fragile. "Yes, until they took it from me." Ella felt goosebumps race down her arms. Before she could ask more, the old woman gently took Ella's hand. I want to tell you something. But not here. Not now. Her fingers trembled. Her eyes glistened. There are people in this community who would do anything to stop the truth. Ella whispered, Mama said they're scared of you. The old woman gave a sad, knowing smile. They are. Because I know their secrets. And I know things they buried. Things they stole. Ella felt the weight of the words hit her chest like a quiet thunder. What did they steal? The old woman exhaled sharply, like the truth had been living inside her too long. My home, my land, my life. She looked at Ella with trembling eyes. And the person who hurt me the most was Mrs. Grant. Ella's stomach twisted. Mrs. Grant? The woman who shouted at her? The woman who terrified everyone? The woman who acted like she owned everything? The old lady whispered, she took everything from me, and she hoped the world would forget. She squeezed Ella's hand gently. But sometimes, the truth finds its way back, even through the smallest kindness. Ella felt tears forming in her eyes, confused and overwhelmed. Why are you telling me this? The old woman's answer came soft, trembling, full of meaning. Because, child, you remind me of someone I loved long ago. Someone whose kindness built this place. Someone they tried to erase. The wind blew softly. The HOA guards began walking toward them from a distance. The old woman stood slowly, whispering shakily, I will come again, and then you will know everything. Before Ella could reply, the woman slipped away, disappearing behind the trees near the gate, leaving behind a quiet storm rising inside Ella's heart. And as Ella walked home, she realized. She wasn't just part of a small act of kindness. She had stepped into a hidden war. A war between truth and lies. Between past and present. Between the real owner and the pretender. And she had no idea the biggest shock was still waiting. Rumors had always existed in the HOA, floating quietly between perfect gardens and polished doorways like dust the residents pretended not to see. But after the old lady's return, the whispers grew louder, sharper, more poisonous. Something ugly had woken inside the neighborhood, fear. It spread through every rich home, every fancy living room, every coffee table where women pretended their lives were flawless. The story of a tired old woman and a maid's daughter now circled the community like a growing storm. But the real truth, the truth buried deep, began to rise. One afternoon, when the sun hung low and the neighborhood looked like a picture inside a golden frame, Ella walked home from school slowly. Her feet dragged as if her heart carried a weight too big. She couldn't stop thinking about the old lady's words. They took everything from me. And the person who hurt me the most was Mrs. Grant. Those words played again and again in her mind, growing darker each time. Ella had always feared Mrs. Grant. But now fear mixed with anger, and confusion, and something new, courage. Maria sensed her daughter's strange silence. She cooked dinner quietly, setting the old steel plates on the table while her thoughts raced. She had heard even more rumors at work that day. Rumors she wasn't sure Ella was ready to hear. The moment Ella stepped inside, Maria took a deep breath. Beta, sit here, she said softly. Mama needs to tell you something. Ella sat, clutching her school bag tightly. Maria looked at her daughter's innocent face, wondering how to protect a child from a truth even adults were scared of. People in the houses I cleaned today. They were whispering, Maria said, voice low. They said that woman, who you helped, was not just a resident. She was someone very important. Ella leaned forward, heartbeat quickening. Who was she, Mama? Maria's hands trembled slightly. They said she was the original owner of this land. Before this community was built. Before the rules. Before the HOA. She was the one who owned half these streets. Ella's breath caught. She didn't blink. She didn't move. Maria continued, voice shaking. And they said, something bad happened to her. Something the HOA hides. Before Ella could ask more, the sound of two women gossiping floated through the thin window walls. Their voices were sharp but excited, unaware someone inside could hear every word clearly. I'm telling you, That old woman is not some poor beggar. She used to be Eleanor Hart, the founder's mother. Mrs. Grant pushed her out years ago, after some family fight. Not a fight. People say it was a betrayal. A big one. Why else would Mrs. Grant look so scared when she saw her? Maria and Ella exchanged a stunned look. Ella swallowed hard. Eleanor Hart? She whispered. The name felt heavy, like a hidden key unlocking something dark. Maria whispered, maybe she came back for a reason. But before Ella could speak, her mind filled with the memory of the woman's trembling voice saying, "You remind me of someone I lost." Her heart pounded. That evening, while the neighborhood settled into its fake calm, Ella couldn't sit inside. Something inside her refused to stay quiet. She stepped out into the evening breeze, her feet guiding her automatically toward the gate. The place where the old lady had always appeared, tired yet determined. She didn't expect to see her again so soon. But there she was, sitting on the same stone bench, wrapped in the same shawl, looking at the same ground, lost in thoughts too heavy for one person to hold. Ella walked toward her slowly. The old woman looked up, and the moment their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. A connection neither fully understood but both deeply felt. Ella sat beside her, heartbeat loud in her ears. "Auntie, people are saying things about you," she whispered. "Things about this place, about Mrs. Grant, about the past." The old lady didn't look surprised. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she exhaled softly, almost tiredly. "People always talk," she said, "but they never speak the full truth." Ella tilted her head. "Then tell me the truth." The old lady closed her eyes for a moment. Her fingers shook as she held her cane. "This place, this community, once belonged to a good man. A man who wanted to build homes where people cared about each other, not judged each other. His name was Arthur Hart. He was my son." Ella's eyes widened. The woman continued softly, tears rising in her voice. "We built this land together. We planted gardens. We designed houses. We dreamed of a kind neighborhood." Her voice cracked. "But after my son died, Mrs. Grant took control." Ella's chest tightened. The old woman's voice dropped to a pained whisper. "She lied. She took my son's documents. She pushed me out. She made new rules. She made the people fear me. And then, she erased my name from everywhere." Ella felt her eyes burn with tears. The old woman looked at Ella with trembling eyes, her voice breaking. "I tried to fight, but I got sick. I had nowhere to go. I lived alone for years." She paused, choking on her words. "Until I saw you." Ella's breath trembled. "Me? Why me?" The old lady reached out and gently held Ella's small hand in both of hers. "Because you remind me of my daughter-in-law. She was kind, gentle. She smiled like you. And she believed this community should belong to everyone, not only the rich." Her voice softened. "But after she died, everything changed. They pushed me out so they could take control." Ella's tears finally fell. The old woman wiped them with a shaky thumb. "You didn't just help me with bus fare," she whispered. "You brought me back to my home. You made me remember what kindness feels like." The wind blew, carrying a cold sadness across the bench. At that moment, a pair of footsteps echoed behind them. Ella turned. Mrs. Grant stood near the guardhouse, staring at them with eyes full of fear and anger. The old woman didn't look away. Mrs. Grant's face twisted with panic. For the first time, Ella understood. This was not just a story. This was a war between the past and the present. A war about ownership. About stolen lives. About betrayal. About truth, and Ella, a simple maid's daughter, had stepped into the center of it. The old lady squeezed her hand gently. "Ella, I will tell you everything soon," she whispered. "Because the truth is yours to hear. And this place might be yours to protect." For the first time in her life, Ella felt something powerful growing inside her, not fear, not guilt, but courage. Because now she knew, the old lady wasn't just a stranger. She was the buried heart of the community, and the truth she carried would shake the HOA to its foundations. The HOA neighborhood, once proud of its silence and fake perfection, felt like it was cracking from the inside. Behind closed doors, residents whispered like frightened birds, jumping at small sounds, checking cameras twice. They pretended everything was normal, but fear had a flavor. Sharp, metallic, impossible to hide, and it spread from house to house like smoke. The rumor had reached every corner now. The old woman who appeared twice was not just an outsider. She was Eleanor Hart, the true founder's mother. People who once ignored her were now terrified of her. Inside her office, Mrs. Grant sat stiffly behind her polished desk, her fingers shaking as she reviewed old files, receipts, land papers, anything that could protect her if the truth surfaced. Her face looked drained, like someone had taken her confidence and left only fear behind. The board members gathered around her, speaking in rushed whispers. What if she tells the girl everything? That Maid's daughter, she's the one Eleanor talks to. She can ruin us. She's old but not foolish. She came back for a reason. What if she wants her land back? Mrs. Grant slammed her hand on the table. Enough, she snapped, but even she couldn't control the tremble in her voice. Her mind kept replaying the moment she saw Eleanor's face after so many years. The cold shock, the guilt she tried to bury, the secret she hoped no one would uncover, the betrayal she thought would stay hidden forever. But secrets, even buried deep, have a way of rising. And Eleanor had risen. Meanwhile, outside the office, Ella sat quietly inside her tiny home, staring at the floor. She still felt the old woman's trembling hand in hers, felt the warmth of a story too heavy for someone her age. Maria sat next to her, her face pale. "Beta," Maria whispered, voice breaking. "You must stay away from her now. They will blame us for everything." But Ella shook her head gently. "Mama, she needs someone. She's all alone." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "And we are barely surviving, Ella. If the HOA becomes angry, they can push us out. We have nowhere to go." The fear in Maria's voice hurt Ella more than anything else. She hugged her mother tightly, but her heart refused to let go of the old woman. Something in Eleanor's story felt connected to her life, like a puzzle piece she didn't understand yet. That evening, a loud knock hit their door. Maria froze. Ella's heart jumped. HOA security. Again. 2 guards stood at the door, their faces stiff and unreadable. One held a clipboard. The other looked past Maria, scanning the room. "We need to ask about the old woman again," the first guard said. "We heard she spoke to the girl today." Maria stepped forward quickly. "Please, she didn't do anything wrong. She's just a child." The second guard leaned in. "We need to know if Eleanor Hart told you anything about the past. Anything about this community. Anything about property, ownership, or family." Maria blinked, speechless. "No, we didn't talk. Please, let us live in peace." Ella wanted to speak, wanted to defend Eleanor, but Maria squeezed her hand, silently begging her to stay quiet. The guards exchanged suspicious glances, then finally left, but not without a warning. "Keep your daughter away from her. The HOA will not tolerate interference." Maria shut the door with shaking hands. She collapsed on the couch, burying her face in her palms. Ella sat beside her, gently placing a hand on her mother's shoulder. "Mama, maybe we should tell someone the truth." Maria lifted her head sharply. "No, Beta. If you speak, they will punish us, not her." But Ella's mind didn't agree. Her heart didn't agree. Because kindness was not a mistake. The next morning, the drama exploded further. An emergency HOA meeting was announced, the first in years. Residents gathered inside the community hall, whispering anxiously. Mrs. Grant stood at the front, trying to maintain her mask of authority, but her voice shook when she spoke. "We have a problem in this neighborhood," she began. "A dangerous outsider has returned. She is manipulating people, especially children. She must be removed and banned." One resident raised his hand. "But she used to live here, right?" Mrs. Grant's eyes narrowed. "That is irrelevant." "But, Irrelevant, she snapped. The residents fell silent. But fear continued to grow. A board member leaned in and whispered to Mrs. Grant, "If she files a claim, we lose everything." Mrs. Grant whispered back, "We need to find her before she causes trouble." Meanwhile, at the far back of the hall, Eleanor Hart stood quietly in the shadows, her shawl wrapped around her thin shoulders, her cane shaking slightly, her eyes burning with a truth too long buried. She waited until the meeting ended, until the last resident stepped out. Then she walked forward. Her cane tapped lightly on the marble floor, each step echoing like a warning shot. Mrs. Grant turned, and the color drained from her face. "Why you shouldn't be here," she whispered. Eleanor stared at her, her eyes steady despite years of suffering. "This is my home, Edith," she said softly. "It always was." Mrs. Grant stepped back, panic rising. "You cannot claim anything. You left. You abandoned this place." Eleanor shook her head. "No, Edith. You pushed me out. You took everything from me when I was sick. You hid documents. You lied to the people. You stole my son's dream." Mrs. Grant's hands shook violently. "Stop. You don't understand." "I understand everything," Eleanor said. Voice calm, almost sad. "You took my home. You took my name. You tried to erase me. But you could not erase the truth." Then she said something that made Mrs. Grant stumble backward. "And now, the truth has someone brave enough to hear it." "Who?" Mrs. Grant whispered, terrified. Eleanor smiled gently. "The girl." Mrs. Grant's eyes widened with horror. Not the maid, not a worker, not a lawyer. A child. A child who dared to help someone no one else would. A child whose kindness reopened a door Mrs. Grant had sealed shut. Mrs. Grant breathed heavily, panic turning into desperation. "You cannot tell her anything. You cannot." "I will tell her everything," Eleanor whispered. And with that, she turned and walked away, her cane tapping like a soft drumbeat leading the truth toward the surface. Outside the hall, Ella stood waiting, her eyes full of courage and fear. Eleanor reached her slowly, held her hand, and said the words that would turn the entire HOA upside down. "Ella, I am taking back what was stolen. And I need you with me." Ella froze. Maria, watching from a distance, felt her heart stop. Mrs. Grant stood inside the hall, shaking, and the whole neighborhood felt the tremor of truth rising. The storm that started with a bus fare now threatened to destroy the entire foundation of the HOA. The morning of the last storm began quietly, too quietly. The HOA neighborhood woke with its usual polished silence, but beneath that silence lived a thick, trembling fear. Gates opened. Cars hummed. Garden sprinklers hissed like whispers. But every resident knew something was coming. Something they could not stop, no matter how rich they were or how strong their rules seemed. Maria woke early, her heart heavy. She barely slept after Eleanor's words, "I am taking back what was stolen." That sentence burned inside her like a candle refusing to go out. She feared for Ella. She feared for their home. She feared the HOA's anger. But she also felt something else. Hope, small but alive. Ella dressed quietly, her face serious, her eyes far older than her 11 years. She carried a weight no child should carry, yet she held it with surprising strength. She walked toward the gate with her mother, feeling the morning air press against her chest, heavy with expectation. Maria gripped her daughter's hand tightly. "Beta, whatever happens today, stay close to me," she whispered. Ella nodded, but her eyes searched ahead, waiting for her. And there she was. Eleanor Hart stood near the community entrance, wearing the same dusty shawl, her cane steady in her hand. But today something was different. She was not alone. Beside her stood two lawyers, holding black folders thick with papers that carried the weight of the truth. As Ella approached, Eleanor's tired face lit up with a soft smile that carried years of pain and longing. She held out her hand and Ella took it without fear. "Today, child," Eleanor whispered gently, "the truth wakes up." Before they could say more, Mrs. Grant and the entire HOA board appeared from the main office. They marched forward like an army, faces tight, eyes sharp, voices trembling with authority they no longer truly held. Mrs. Grant looked at Eleanor with a mixture of panic and rage. "What is this?" she snapped. "What are you planning to do?" Eleanor didn't flinch. "Something long overdue," she replied calmly. The residents began gathering, forming a circle around them. Some stood on porches, others peeked from windows, but no one walked away. The whole neighborhood felt like a courtroom waiting for the final verdict. One lawyer stepped forward and opened the thick file. "Mrs. Grant," he began, voice firm. "You are being informed officially that the rightful ownership of this land, this entire HOA community, belongs to Mrs. Eleanor Hart. The original documents were never transferred legally. They were hidden, and forged signatures were used under false pretenses." A shocked gasp moved through the crowd like a rippling wave. Mrs. Grant's face twisted. "No! This is nonsense." She left. She abandoned her rights. She was sick and she stopped abruptly, realizing the depth of her own words. Eleanor stepped forward, her tired voice carrying more strength than all their rules combined. "I was sick, and you took advantage of my sickness. You took my home, my son's dream, and my life's work. You locked me out of the community I built with love." Her voice cracked. "And you hoped no one would remember." The silence that followed felt like the ground itself was listening. Eleanor looked down at Ella, her eyes soft but filled with heartbreaking truth. "When that child helped me, she gave me the courage to return. She reminded me of who I was, before you erased me." Mrs. Grant's mask broke. She turned red, then pale, then furious. "This girl is nothing but a maid's daughter. She has no place in this matter." Thunder filled the air, not in the sky, but inside the crowd. Eleanor turned sharply, her voice trembling with deep, protective fire. "Do not speak about her that way." She paused, eyes burning. "That child has more humanity in her little heart than you have in your entire existence." Ella's soul shook. Maria felt tears gather in her eyes. Mrs. Grant clenched her fists. "You can't do this. You have no proof that." The lawyer interrupted sharply. "We have every proof. The original land deeds with your husband's signature forgery. The medical records showing Mrs. Hart was under treatment and unable to consent. Witness statements. Bank transfers to your personal account." Mrs. Grant stumbled backward. Residents whispered loudly now, their perfect masks cracking. "She stole the land. All these years she lied. Oh my God. She trapped Eleanor." Eleanor lifted her trembling hand. "This community has lost its heart. It became a place of fear, not kindness. A place of judgment, not unity." She turned to Ella. "But yesterday, I saw a spark of what this place was meant to be." Tears rolled down Ella's cheeks. Eleanor spoke again, voice shaking with emotion. "This child reminded me of the daughter-in-law I once had. The woman whose kindness built the early foundation of this community. She smiled like this girl. She helped everyone. She inspired everyone. And when she died, the kindness died with her." She held Ella's hand more tightly, but Ella brought it back. Mrs. Grant screamed, "Get them out. They don't belong here." But the crowd didn't move. No one supported her. Not one person. Eleanor lifted her chin. "I am reclaiming my land. My home. My name." Her voice rose. "And the first people who will live under my protection are Maria and Ella." Everyone gasped. Maria covered her mouth with shaking fingers. "Me? Us?" she whispered in disbelief. Eleanor nodded slowly, tears sliding down her old cheeks. "You and your daughter will move into one of the houses that once belonged to my family. It is yours now. Safe. Forever." Ella hugged her tightly, her small arms wrapping around the old woman who had carried years of heartbreak alone. The lawyers handed documents to the HOA board. Mrs. Grant was stripped of her authority on the spot. Security escorted her away as she screamed, her voice echoing through a community no longer hers. As the crowd watched silently, Eleanor placed a soft hand on Ella's head. "Kindness," she whispered, "is the strongest power in the world. Even the richest people fear it, because they cannot buy it. Maria cried silently, hugging Ella from the other side. Eleanor smiled, soft, tired, the smile of someone who had finally come home after years of exile. And in that moment, the HOA neighborhood changed forever. Not because a powerful woman returned, but because a small girl with a warm heart saved her. The child who gave a stranger bus fare ended up giving her back her entire life. And in return, the stranger gave the child a home. A real home. A forever home. A home built not on rules, but on kindness.